I know for new people, just to talk a little bit about the book before we get started. And we'll be starting today in section 1.3, which is entitled Man. The book is called The Way of God, Derech Hashem by the Ramchal, who's Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, and mankind. And he was a rabbi that lived in the 18th century, and like all great rabbis of his time, his genius was absolutely missed by the people of his own generation. It was only after his death that a lot of his writings came to be appreciated for the absolute genius that they were. He was a man that was, he was an Orthodox Jew, very devoted to God, and it was just basically, in his own right, and just his intellect was a genius. He had an incredible intellect, and he was a prolific writer. And starting at the age of 17, he published his first work. And this work is translated into English by another very amazing rabbi, Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, who passed away at a young age. And he did a lot of work to bring the Ramchal's writing to people who may not have the ability to read it in the Hebrew. And Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan did contributed a lot to people, English-speaking people who had a desire to study Torah, but not necessarily the tools such as Hebrew to do so. And in his own right, he was a very amazing person and a genius as well. We were discussing last week some of the fundamentals and how the Ramchal begins, and this is a book where the author begins in very general and very broad understanding, and he narrows it. He brings it to a more narrow and narrower focus as the book progresses. So he starts very broad, very general, and drawing upon those principles, he builds upon them more and more and more. The name of the book is Derech Hashem, The Way of God, and it's a classic. This is a book that's taught in yeshivas throughout the Jewish world. It's a pretty amazing book. He's also written other books. He wrote a series of books on logic and interpretation of Jewish texts called the Talmud and other texts. And he there's not a lot of need to do a synopsis of previous weeks because a lot of these concepts are come in and play again, and he'll bring them up again and again and expand upon them. So if you like, again, all will go well. So I'll read a section. How about that? Is that better? Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for your patience. I'm sorry PalTalk crashed on me. So I'm going to read the first section, and as the questions come up and appropriate, I don't want to go on and on and on without any opportunity for questions and that type of thing. So I'll read the first section starting. And that's page 45. As we have discussed, man is the only creature created for the purpose of cleaving to God. Only man is placed between perfection and deficiency with the power to earn perfection. Man must earn this perfection, however, through his own free will and desire. If he were compelled towards perfection, then he would not really be the master of it. Rather, he who compelled him would be the one responsible, and God's purpose would not be fulfilled. It was therefore necessary that man be given free will and be balanced between good and evil, and not be compelled towards either. He has the power of choice and is able to choose either side knowingly and willingly, and possesses whichever one he chooses. Man was therefore created with a good urge, Yetzer HaTov, and the evil urge, Yetzer Hara. He has the power to incline himself in whichever direction he chooses. And the very important thing here is to understand that the Ramchal is beginning at the state of the intended purpose of creation. Things dramatically change as you read beyond the introduction in Genesis. You see that things dramatically changed when Adam and Eve choose to partake of the forbidden tree, and they actually profoundly affect creation, and we feel those very effects today. So the Ramchal is beginning at this is the purpose and intent of creation, was to have this perfect balance, this beautiful symmetry in the universe. And the nice thing about symmetry, when it's perfectly balanced, there's no beginning, there's no end. And so at this state, he said, was necessary, just enough evil, and we'll get into a little bit of a discussion further on in the book about what evil is, to allow Adam and Eve to choose to serve God. And we talked about in the previous section that the whole point of creation, the whole purpose of our existence as people that have the capacity and ability to connect to God is to do just that, to become intimate in a relationship with our Creator. It's the whole sole purpose of our existence. And like any good relationship, we want people to relate to us willingly. And I think PalTalk may crash in a moment, but I'm going to go on. Can anyone hear me? Okay, good. I have a crash window up, so I'm going to continue as much as I can. So that's our whole intent. That's our whole purpose, is God just chooses us, not because He needs us, but because He desires us and He desires a relationship with us. So we have, at the beginning, this ability, Adam and Eve had this ability to have this balance between good and evil. They had the choice, but it was not a part of their nature at that point, at the very beginning of creation. And so I'll continue on a bit because I'll expand upon these ideas. In order that God's...
Whoa, she got right off of the computer. She'll be back in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, I would just briefly note before she returns that you will note in this section the topic begins where free will is discussed. I think that's interesting because I know that's a big issue today in Christianity, is do we or do we not have free will? Anyway, there's that begins to manifest itself rather strongly, beginning with what she is now discussing. Mic is free.
Thank you. My apologies. I am having crashing issues, but it's hard to not expand upon some of these ideas, to not go into them a little bit deeper, because there's so much it could be saying, but he hasn't touched upon these points yet. The other thing I want to touch upon is, and I brought it up briefly last week, is that there's the idea that we are the masters of our own choice, that we have the ability to choose good and to say no to evil, or to say yes to evil and decline good. And the example of that is found right at the very beginning of the Torah, where you have Cain and Abel, and Cain is contemplating murdering his brother, and God comes to him and says, you have the ability, sin is crouching at the door, but you have the ability to overcome it if you so choose. And we know that he did not make that choice. But the idea of not having the ability to choose good, to not having the ability to choose to serve God, that we're not robots, we're not forced to, that God desires us to come to Him by choice, to serve Him by choice. And there are methods and correct ways to approach God, and there are incorrect ways to approach God, that all of this is here for a reason. And the idea that you don't have the ability to connect to your Creator, that you don't have the ability to choose, is basically an anathema in Judaism. It's completely the opposite of why you're here, why you exist. To say that you don't have the ability to choose basically defeats the whole purpose of your existence. I'll continue on. In order that God's goal be best achieved, the highest wisdom decreed that man should consist of two opposites. These are his pure spiritual soul and his unenlightened physical body. Each one is drawn towards its nature, so that the body inclines towards the material, while the soul leans towards the spiritual. The two are then in a constant state of battle. If the soul prevails, it not only elevates itself, but elevates the body as well, and the individual thereby attains his destined perfection. If he allows the physical to prevail, on the other hand, then besides lowering his body, he also debases his soul. Such an individual will be unfit for perfection and will be kept far from it, God forbid. Even so, he retains the ability to subjugate the physical to his soul and intellect, and thereby achieve perfection. If we can stay on, it's very important to stay on topic. So the important thing is, this is laying down concepts that you'll see are involved in other concepts. These concepts of choice, of by choosing to serve God in the way that He has constructed us to serve. We can do great spiritual good, and we can affect ourselves and the world around us. And by choosing to disobey God, to live in such a way where we aren't relating to God, that we can do great harm. These are really important concepts for other ideas that will come up later on in the book. And so he's building a really good case here. And I can't stress enough the idea of choice and its consequences. We are spiritual beings trapped in this physical bodies, and we may not always perceive and understand the true impact that our actions have, because we live in a physical world. We can't always comprehend, and we definitely don't see the spiritual realm around us. We don't know how much our actions impact ourselves and the people around us. So by the ability to choose good, by the ability to affect creation, we are placed in a very powerful position in this world. I'll go just a little bit further and then open up to questions. God's goodness decreed that there be a limit to man's effort required to attain perfection. After this period of effort is completed, he attains this level of perfection and then is allowed to enjoy it for all eternity. God therefore created distinct periods. One is a time of earning, and the other is a time of receiving reward. As a general rule, however, that which pertains to good is always greater. The period of earning is therefore limited and lasts no longer than God's wisdom decreed suitable for his purpose. The period of reward, on the other hand, has no limit, and man continues to derive pleasure from his earned perfection for all eternity. And this brings up another very important concept. Well, there's a few here. One, that Hashem, God, always leans towards mercy, towards chesed, towards loving kindness, and he tempers his justice and his judgment in mercy and love for his creation. He doesn't stand there waiting to smite people just because they get a mistake and they don't get it, they get things wrong. Out of his love for us, out of his desire for connectivity to his creation, he's patient and loving and kind, and always leans towards that. The other thing is, there's a period of earning and reward. This earning isn't done like some checklist, like I have these 613 commandments that I've got to do or stay away from and I'll get in. The first and foremost command is to have faith in Hashem. If you have a relationship with anybody and it's a healthy one, you would choose to do things that please them, to try and avoid things that displease them, to create this closeness and this bond with the one you love. And our relationship between people here on earth is just a small play out of what we are to be with our God. We are here to relate. We're here to relate to each other, but we're mostly here to relate with God. And so he has given us this opportunity to serve him, to please him, and there's a great reward for doing so. On the other hand, without saying it, when we disconnect from God, we disconnect from our purpose, then there are consequences for those actions as well. And so Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden were placed at this wonderful position where they had just enough evil in the world to cause them to make the choice, and they had only one command. There was only one command at the time: don't eat from that tree. And had they done, I'm jumping ahead, but this is important, that this was a period for them to earn the reward, to become worthy of the reward that God was wanting to give them, and they didn't do it. So do we have any questions, or should I go on a little bit more? I don't know if anybody... Oh, Adam, okay. I'll let you go ahead with some questions.
Thank you, Isabel. On page 45, section 2, he says, these opposites are his pure spiritual soul, and opposite of that is his unenlightened physical body. This is difficult for me at this time because I always was taught or assumed or had an understanding that my soul was in fact a part of my physical body and made the choices for my physical body as if they was in companionship or in agreement or one and the same. But here he says my soul is opposite my physical body. Now that gives me a problem because my physical body has no mind or thought of itself. It is a physical thing that is ruled by my soul. Am I misunderstanding this? Mike is free.
I'll answer that and then I'll let Olive have an opportunity. I didn't skip over that. It's a really deep topic, and I know that in like Western Christian thought that the idea to the body, soul, and spirit is very different than you find in Saint traditionally, and everybody's belief is different, but it's very different than what you find in Judaism in the idea of the body and the soul. That you have levels. If you read in the Torah, there's different words for what you would call soul. There's like an animal soul that gives life to all animals, but as dynamic and as high functioning as a chimpanzee can be. They can color, they can write, they use language. They don't sit and they don't contemplate the meaning of their existence. They don't ask if God is there. Exactly. So you have that is that level of the animal soul. Well, I'll get to that. And right now, at the very beginning of this section, the Ramchal is discussing this unique state that Adam and Eve existed in before they made the choice to disobey. And at that time, the idea is that they were perfectly integrated between the physical and the spiritual. It's a state that it's very difficult. It's a very deep topic and a very broad subject. But to sum it up in a very poor way, as much as I can, that their soul, the neshama, is this very high soul that relates to God and has a connection to our body. And he's going to get into this a little bit more. And at the time of Adam and Eve standing in the Garden of Eden and relating to God, there was no difference between physical, between spiritual. In this world where there's perfect symmetry, it's the best way I can relate it. There was no beginning and no end of the spiritual versus the physical. There's no distinction in that time. And as a result, their body and their soul were perfectly integrated. The soul is the connectivity to God. It's our spiritual self. The physical body is meant to relate and to convey the soul's actions in this world. And when the two are working in harmony in the way they were intended, then man has a great ability to function perfectly in both levels. And as a result of the fall, this connection, the ability to perceive the physical and the spiritual and to live in both worlds, was disconnected. Almost like the idea of taking this beautiful, brilliant light and putting the darkest cover over it and hiding it. Yeah, and those are the levels of the soul. You have, and that's something we'll get into. And there's a study, if you're interested, that I can get into that. It's a little bit deeper than I'd want to get into at this point without coming into some other topics. So I'll let Mike's free.
I hope I could be heard. Can I be heard? Thank you. Isabel, I understand that God is love. I understood that He has no imperfection. He made us to love us. He made us to have relationship with us, and so on and so forth. But one thing, and I also understand that He gave us the power of choose the direction we want to go in life, bad or good. However, I still am puzzled, since we know God is pure love and there is no darkness in Him. Although He knew we are going to fall into sin and go our own directions, and obviously thousands of years has passed and human being has suffered because of their own sins. Why would, if you can, please, if you can't, it's okay. why would God decide to make us, even though He knew we fall? It just somehow, it doesn't make sense to me. The loving God knew that humankind will fall, and we are going to go through all this pain. And also, as a result of it, as a result of sin, we have to pay for our sins. That's the consequences. And since He doesn't want us to have pain or misery, and never mind about that, because of His nature, His attribute, His love, how can this happen? How can He allow? He made us, although He knew we're going to fall. Thank you.
If you don't mind, Bruce, I'll address that. Can't say quickly, but that is a very deep topic, and you'll see as we get on and we get into the book that when one falls, when one makes a mistake, that more good can come out of that than if one had stayed perfect and never made the mistake in the first place. And there's the idea that we talked about the concept of this righteous person who's serving God, who is devoted to Hashem and doesn't is a very perfected being as a person. That the idea that somebody who has messed up big time and comes back to God and does teshuvah, which means teshuvah, return to God, stands at an even higher place, because this really righteous person may have never gone to a bar, or I use Matisyahu as a really great example of that person. He was this lost soul that toured with bands throughout the world. He dropped out of life and followed bands and went to bars and did the music scene. And when he found God, he impacted not only himself but hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, not in Jew and Gentile alike. And so the concept, and that's just exactly. And so the idea is no amount of suffering, no amount of striving, no amount of seeking out God, no amount of desperate searching and questioning is ever lost. This energy has a purpose, it has a function, and it's not God being cruel, it's creation becoming even greater, the potential for good even deeper than existed even in the Garden of Eden. And as a result of our actions, if we choose to do the right thing, that those of us who didn't live the perfect life can profoundly impact creation in a really deep way, in ways that no other type of person could. King David is a great example. He messed up a lot, and he was used greatly by God because of his propensity to do. He has this very strong, we talk about the good urge and the bad urge. King David was one who had a very, very, very powerful Yetzer Hara, and it came out more than a few times, but he always did teshuvah. He always returned to Hashem with all of his heart, and his ability to affect the world is shown in the fact that his lineage is chosen for that of Mashiach himself. So, if you have this very powerful, strong urge toward Yetzer Hara, doesn't mean that you can't take that force and channel it for God as well. The idea that you have the good and the bad can be used, can be suppressed, can be channeled and turned into the greatest good. So, Mike is free.
Yeah, I would just kind of briefly point out too that the time you notice what she was reading about. There was two times: a time of earning and a time of reward. The question you asked, Olive, was specific to the time of earning. And in the grand scheme of things, that is a very, very tiny speck of time. Very, very small compared to the infinite time of reward. So that's, I think, if you kind of look at it too from the perspective of time, it's nothing. I mean, it's so brief in the grand scheme that it's almost becomes a non-issue. Now, real quick, two things I'd like to point out that you read, Isabel, that for me when I was reading the book jumped out. He started he mentioned one of the first times free will, which is a big issue in the traditional in Christianity, and he also discusses a time of earning your eternal destiny, which of course directly contradicts what most people think of in traditional Christianity. But it's only now being mentioned, and the only reason I bring that up because if you're a traditional Christian and you hear that and you're turned off, he hasn't given the full picture. Okay, so I just wanted to caution people about that. He hasn't given full picture yet about that time of earning and the help we may or may not have during that period. So I just wanted to bring that up because for some people that would be very distasteful, and I just wanted to point that out. The book goes on, but there's a time of earning and a time of reward. Okay, that's it. Mike is free.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very, very good. Yeah, I know when you say earning and reward and these type of things that everyone has a bias, and it's hard not to think of doing these things out of rote, doing these things because you want something. It's not that. If that's the way that you're approaching God, then you're completely missing the point. And so this period of earning is attachment. It's growing close. It's a discovery period. And there's a correct, as I keep saying, and there's a correct way to approach God, and there's an incorrect way to approach God. I'll continue on I think we're in section 4, right? It's 1, 3, 4. Yeah. Since the period of earning and that of reward are different, it is appropriate that man's environment and experiences be different in the two. While he is striving toward perfection, he must be in a setting containing elements necessary for such effort. The period of earning must therefore be the one where a maximum challenge exists and where the spiritual and physical are in constant strife. In this environment, there must be nothing to prevent the material from prevailing and doing what it can, and conversely, there must be nothing to prevent the spiritual from doing likewise. Nothing should exist that would give either one an inappropriate advantage. Although it might seem best to make the spiritual stronger than the physical, in light of man's true purpose and what God desires of him, namely, that he earn perfection through his own effort, it would not be good at all. In the period of reward, however, the exact opposite is appropriate. The more the physical would prevail, the more it would darken the soul and prevent it from being drawn close to God. During the time of reward, it is therefore appropriate that the soul prevail and that the physical be totally subjugated to it and not restrain it at all. It is for this reason that God created two worlds, this world, Olam Hazeh, and the world to come, Olam Haba. The environment and natural laws of this world are necessary for man during this period of striving. The environment and laws of the world to come, on the other hand, are what are necessary for man during this period of reward. It's really important, and this is amazing because this is coinciding with this Parsha period we're beginning in Bereshit and Genesis with the whole idea of the creation of man and his fall and his placement in the garden with the one command, and this was the environment necessary that there existed. Again, this is talking about this really the original purpose of creation was to have this perfect balance, to have only what's necessary for striving, to make the choice possible, and once the choice was made, then they could have moved on. In this world, this perfect balance where physical and spiritual are in enough proportion for there to be not one pulling more than the other, that doesn't exist anymore. When Adam and Eve fell, that condition ceased to be, and we are in the condition we have now. And the striving is a very necessary element built into creation for like the Ramchal says, for you to be the true master of the good that you receive, for you to be the true reward for what you've done. And I'm going to read on a little bit more because there's something I want to say, but I don't want to skip through a lot of it, but there's some more that I want to add, but I would like to Ramchal to introduce the topic first. Among the things that one must realize is the fact that man has been radically altered. As a result of Adam's sin, a great change took place, transforming both man and his world to a large degree, entailing many things and having numerous effects. When we speak of man and his environment, we must therefore distinguish between his state before the sin and his state afterwards. When Adam was created, he was precisely in the state that we have discussed until now, composed of two equal opposites, the body and the soul. His environment contained both good and evil, and he was balanced between the two to choose whichever he wished. The appropriate thing for him to have done would have been to choose the good. Had he done so, his soul would have overcome his body, and the spiritual world would have dominated the physical. He would have then immediately attained perfection, and it would have remained with him forever. And so you get the concept of this perfect balance that existed is no longer there, and we live in a world where we are spiritually disconnected. And as a result of this disconnection, we don't necessarily perceive creation in its proper context. And the idea of evil increasing is the amount of God's light that is able to penetrate into this world is dependent upon our actions. And as a result of Adam's sin, a great portion of God's light was withheld from the world. You can say, in effect, that God put on clothes and veiled himself from creation and his creation, hid himself in nature. And now Adam has to strive and work extra hard just to get to the state of connectivity that he enjoyed in the garden. And the earth that was a blessing to him now becomes a curse. And so the environment that was created for a perfect balance becomes a period of striving and work and toil. The earth itself becomes a curse. Adam and Eve's relationship becomes very altered as well. How they relate to each other has changed dramatically with their choice as well. You see that Adam and Eve had this perfect relationship with God. They related to each other, and with the fall of Adam and Eve, you have how they relate to God. They hide themselves. They disconnect from their Creator. They disconnect from each other, and they cover themselves. It says, they saw that they were naked. They perceived that they were naked, that they had lost the command that they blew it. And so instead of coming to Hashem, instead of connecting to Him, they do what now is the natural reaction of most people, is to withdraw, to disconnect, and to hide themselves. And so now you see that their soul, which was their glory now, is veiled, and they have a very difficult way to relate to God, because now we are spiritual beings, we're physical beings, but that connectivity and the ability to perceive both worlds at the same time has been taken away. And so we're kind of like blind men groping in the dark without a leader, and that's what Hashem's Torah has revealed. His revelation to us is for us to find our way back. I'll go on just a little bit more, and then I'll open it up for questions again and comments. If we are normally aware of the soul's existence only because it provides us with life and the ability to think, like Adam was saying, it is necessary to realize, however, that the soul has another function: to purify man's physical body, gradually elevating it until it, too, can take pleasure from perfection along with the soul. If Adam had not sinned, he would have been able to attain this total perfection. His soul would have purified his body step by step until he reached the level required to permanently partake of this everlasting bliss. One of the deep concepts in creation, and it's really convey in this limited time span, is that Adam and Eve were created these beautiful vessels, unique in creation, to receive God's love, God's relation, to relate with the Creator in a way that no other creature had the ability to do before. They're vessels made to receive, made to relate, made to connect. And by disconnecting, by choosing to disobey God's one command, they disconnected from the purpose of their existence, and they profoundly altered the way that mankind relates to God. And the soul, the neshama, and the body, that physical soul, are opposites, and they were meant to work in harmony together to bring about this state of perfection in themselves and in creation. And they were perfectly stationed at that point to do just that, and they didn't do it. And so now the soul's ability to affect the body that it's attached to is profoundly limited in this world. And let me try and relate that the soul is this higher intellect. You have your body, the nefesh. Then you have the ruach, which is the wiring to the next realm, which is your neshama, which is your higher soul. And most people in this world don't have that higher connection. Not to say, not to be blunt, that's the idea behind this, is that there is spiritual disconnection. You were born very physical, and he gets into that a little bit later in this section. You're not born with that connectivity. It's the nature of this world is you were born spiritually disconnected, and you have to find that connection by seeking God and by serving God and by striving towards God in this world. And as a result of this spiritual disconnection, the ability of your soul, which is connected to God, to function in this world is severely limited. And there became a really important thing that happened in the garden is Adam and Eve, had they stayed in their fallen state, would have lived forever. And now you have two beings who are perfectly stationed between good and evil, who now have the ability to choose evil and to perpetrate evil and to do so for the rest of their lives. And so God, to limit the ability of man and to actually bring back a state of perfection, caused death to become a reality for both Adam and Eve, to limit the time period that they can do damage or they can do good. As Bruce said before, this period of striving, this period of earning is very limited compared to the reward and the bliss that we will experience in the world to come if we choose to do the right thing now and here, to connect to God in the correct way through the correct methods and the correct means. So I'll open up the mic.
Thank you very much. Page 49, Section 7. We are normally aware of the soul's existence only because it provides us with life and the ability to think. Okay, that's the soul. Well, then, what does the body's function? You see, it has to lift up the body. What I understand, if the body don't think and does not provide us with life, but that's the function of the soul, well, what is the body? I'm bogged down here in this thought. I can't understand what does it mean by the body being lifted up when the body is just from what I can see here, is just a piece of flesh, bone and flesh and blood that you feed. I hate to be please enlighten me. Mike is free.
I'm gonna jump there over all of my apologies. There's a couple of analogies I'd like to give. One, as spiritual beings, that our highest level of functioning is to connect to our Creator, who is, I don't even want to use the word spiritual, but to connect to our Creator, and through that means our physical body is a very dynamic, wonderful, amazing creation, but it is a vessel. It is our way to interact in the physical realm. And I think it's only in the advent of the computer age that people can really understand. It's like if you go into an online world, you have the idea of an avatar. You can create this dynamic thing that can interact with others, but you're the one controlling it. You're the one behind the scenes that are causing it to function, where to go, what to say. And so the body is our way for our spiritual self to have an impact in the physical world. And it's like when you sit behind I have a vehicle that has a computer brain that is doing all these functions all at once. It's monitoring oxygen level and gas intake, and it's monitoring different systems in the car, but I'm the one controlling it, good or bad, and it's only the vehicle that I use to get from one place to the other. When I drive 45 miles to work, that's something that I couldn't normally do in my own true self, but given this additional tool, I can do things in this world that I couldn't do before. They're poor analogies, but that's the whole function of the physical self. And before the fall of man, that these two, the soul has this connectivity to God, and this is the conduit through which we bring spiritual light, Hashem's light, into ourselves, into our own life, and into the world around us. And so in this world now, as a result of the fall, that it's almost like the soul is connected to this physical body that is literally, it's like an ember thrown into the snow. It's constantly going cold. And the soul's association with the body is very damaging to itself. And the soul and the spirit, I know one thing maybe we would like to do is I'll have to place it on our website, but the idea of the soul in Judaism is not the physical, your body, spirit, and soul. There's different words used in Scripture, and they come at different levels. It's like a ladder to God. There's higher levels of existence beyond this physical body. We know the Scriptures tell us that there's a heaven, and there's within the heavenly realms there's levels of heaven as well. And we have within our creation we have levels of interacting with God as well. So it's a big creation, our spiritual self. Does this relate to out-of-body experiences? That's a whole other topic. And the Ramchal does get into the idea of spiritual entities, and he touches upon a little bit of the soul. He gets very quickly into, because we know we're not the only ones that are created. We know there's the angelic realm, there's the demonic realm. So the Ramchal is he's focusing on man right now, saying, okay, we have this physical body, we have a spiritual self. These two are connected, good and bad, throughout all levels of creation. And the soul's function was to purify the body, to uplift it, to function as a team for the service of God. And as a result of our fall, now the soul is literally like a dying ember. As soon as it associates with the body, it causes great, I don't want to use the word damage, but it really dampens the soul's ability to function as it was meant to be. And as a result of all of this, he'll get into the idea of what that means for us now. So let me give the mic up.
Yeah, Adam, I had the same question that you had when I was reading earlier, and when I went to page 51, it gave me the answer. When it says that when Adam sinned, however, he personally caused concealment of perfection and thus an increase of evil. Man himself was responsible for the greater amount of evil that existed in him, and it therefore became much difficult for him to abandon it. He could no longer earn perfection as easily as when he personally bore no responsibility for his personal deficiencies. The effort required to earn perfection was therefore doubled. Man must first bring both himself and the world back to the state in which they existed before the first sin. Only then can he raise himself from the state of his desired level of perfection. And this is what the soul does. The soul is what leads the body to be perfected. Is how I understood it.
Yeah, it's up to Isabel, but in my opinion, we should wait for her to cover sections before we read ahead for her. Otherwise, we'll be doing this the entire time we discuss this, because we can always jump further ahead for those of us who have read ahead and respond to questions. And to me, if we start that habit, it's going to result in confusion and chaos. And so I don't know. It's up to Isabel, but in my opinion, we should not read beyond what she has already read. Let her read it. She is the one who is instructing us. Now, one thing I would point out among what she's read that I think personally needs some thought and people need to grasp is what he says in section 5, that as a result of Adam's sin, a great change took place, transforming both man and his world to a large degree. That one sentence encompasses much. And I think it's people just need to bear in mind an enormous upheaval took place in creation as a result of Adam's sin. And, of course, that leads to the situation we're in today. Mike is free.
I'm sorry to interrupt a lovely conversation I'm sure you all are having, but I'm going to all the Christian rooms and letting you all know. Another Christian room was closed today.
I'm sorry, this is a study room. I just want you to know that we're trying to remain on topic, and after the room is closed, you're more than welcome to bring up different topics outside of what we're talking about, but it's really important just for the purpose and time of our study that we remain focused on this. So thank you, Bill. Mike is free.
Okay. My question is this: if I understood you correct, the moment mankind sinned, our spirit really, or our soul, whatever you call it, I still cannot figure out this spirit and soul. I've tried for a long time, but I realize that we are human beings and we have a spirit, but I can't distinguish between the soul and the spirit. However, my question is that you from what you're reading, my understanding is that our nature, when God made us, our nature was designed to have that spiritual connection with God, which means to follow Him, and because of disobedience, that nature is just all mixed up and it's just going all over, right? And as a result of that, we have a lot of problems. Can you please elaborate a little bit about that, if I understood correct? Thank you.
Actually, I'll read on to the next section because it's really important. It really is important. Like Jacqueline was reading ahead to answer a lot of the things that are coming up. And I'll read here section 8. Here, when Adam sinned, however, things were greatly changed. The amount of evil that existed initially was just enough to assure that man would be in a perfect balance, allowing him to gain perfection through his own efforts. When man sinned, though, he caused evil to increase, both in himself and in all of creation. As a result, it became much more difficult for him to attain the perfection that God intended for him. At first, it was very easy for man to overcome his natural faults and attain perfection. The highest wisdom had arranged things in the best and fairest manner. The only reason why evil and deficiency existed in man was to make it a part of his nature, a part that he would willingly abandon in favor of good. By simply disassociating himself from deficiencies in both himself and in the world, the first man was supposed to bring about the perfection immediately. No further effort would be necessary. When Adam sinned, however, he personally caused concealment of perfection and thus an increase of evil. Man himself was responsible for the greater amount of evil that existed in him, and it therefore became much more difficult for him to abandon it. He could no longer earn perfection as easily as when he personally bore no responsibility for his personal deficiencies. The effort required to earn perfection was therefore doubled. Man must first bring both himself and the world back to the state in which they existed before the first sin. Only then can he raise himself from that state to his destined level of perfection. And now, sidelining back to the whole soul-spirit discussion, that really is honestly a discussion in amongst itself. It's hard to convey without giving, pointing people to a little more background information. And using the word soul and spirit is very different in how they're applied in Christianity than in Judaism. And it's how you're applying the terms and where and when you're applying them. It makes all the difference in the world. So, getting back to the idea of creation being altered, the idea is now that God, in a sense, retracts a bit more from the world, hides himself behind the veil of nature, and as a result, there's an imbalance that is innate in all of us. Some people have a very stronger pull towards the Yitzhara than others, but the point is we all have that. One, we don't have this abundant light of God just evident throughout all of creation. In this world, God's presence is hidden. It's easy to miss if you're not looking. And as a result, you can miss God in this world if you choose to. But if you make the effort, and it is a tremendous effort in this world to remain connected to God, to connect to God, and to see Hashem in all things, and to serve Hashem in all ways, because it's very easily part of our nature to be drawn towards physical, material things. And one of the realities of this world was when Adam and Eve left the Garden of Eden, now they had to work. The abundance, they didn't have to worry about their parnasa. Their livelihood was provided by God. The only thing they had, the only responsibility was to serve Hashem. And as a result of this, they had all the time in the world to study and to contemplate and to meditate. But when they fell and creation became this very difficult existence for a spiritual being to find meaning and purpose and connection. As a result of this, Adam has to work hard just to make a living. He's required to become involved in this world through work and family. All of these things draw him away from serving God, draw him away from his spiritual connectivity, and make him a very physical being. They're not bad. You have to eat, you have to have a house, you have to have a livelihood, and, God willing, you have children and a marriage. Those things all require attention. They all require time. And the Yetzer Hara, that evil inclination, isn't bad. It's that evil inclination keeps us fed and clothed and working for our family, because I don't know about you, but there's just times I don't want to get up and go to work. But it's that draw to the physical world that we have and we are required to have that makes us very unique, in that we can, in the big things and the little things of life, if we so choose, we can see the spiritual aspect of everything, and we can relate to God through every aspect of our life. Not to withdraw and become some type of monks, who shun the physical realm so we can connect to God. We are required to use the physical realm, the physical things around us. This is the environment God gave us to connect to God, and that is a very big challenge for a creature who is now inclined towards physical things and not towards spiritual things, and it can be very dangerous. I liken it to an alcoholic working behind a bar. It can be a very, very bad thing. But we do have the ability, we do have the tools, and we do have the resources through the help of Hashem to do all of the things that He would desire of us in this world. I'll let the mic go free.
Okay, shalom everyone. I hope I'm not jumping anyone. Can I get a mic check, please? Okay. I wanted to ask a question. I hope I haven't missed anything because I wasn't in the room the entire time. But, one moment, let me move my microphone. Okay, I wanted to ask a question on page 51, section 8, when it says, when Adam sinned, however, things were greatly changed. The amount of evil that existed initially was just enough to assure that man would be in the perfect balance, allowing him to gain perfection through his own efforts. Can you... I have a question regarding the tree of knowledge of good and evil, but if it's going to be covered in another section, then I'll wait. But can you explain what it means when he says the amount of evil that existed initially? What evil or evil inclination, whatever word you want to use, existed initially? I'm not understanding what evil is he referring to, or what exactly is he referring to that it existed initially? Thank you.
I would say evil is a side effect of God restraining himself in creation. It is the true good, the true purpose is that God's light would prevail and good would prevail. So any type of concealment, any type of withdrawal or hiding of the presence of God in this world is darkness, is evil, and exactly the absence of God's light. And out of necessity and out of desire for a creation that would choose to serve him, God did veil himself, and as a result of that, the side effect is that evil came into existence. And getting back to the idea that mankind has a choice, unlike the angels, unlike the demons, unlike all of these different creatures that are in our world, we have the choice to serve God. And because we have that choice, we can also withhold God's light in this world and cause evil to increase in ourselves and in creation as well. So the idea of evil existing in the garden was just enough concealment, just enough darkness for them to make the choice to serve God. And so I'll let the mic go free.
My understanding always of returning to God and following His commandment is, at the end of the day, it's for our own good, and we're not doing any favor to God. But my question is this: what does it mean that we should serve God? Because when we say we serve God, it means like we are doing something for God. But obviously we all know that God doesn't need us to do anything for Him. I like to understand this concept of serving Him. What does it mean? Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to point something. I was waiting on you, Isabel. Feel free to always take the mic. One thing that she read that I haven't heard it mentioned, but I was busy. When she read the sentence, the effort required to earn perfection was therefore doubled. Man must first bring himself, or bring both himself and the world back to the state in which they existed before the first sin. I read that because, just to point this out, recall in the New Testament how Yeshua is the second Adam. Recall that. Okay? We won't get into that, but all throughout this book, and this is a Judaic book, but all throughout this book, you will find very clear evidences of what you may believe regarding the New Testament. That's one reason this book is so outstanding. It's written from somebody who had no New Testament bias at all, yet you'll find much stuff in it. So I just wanted to point that out to people, what he said there. And as you read that, consider what it says in the New Testament about Yeshua being the second Adam, and how Yeshua was to undo the work of the devil, basically to bring mankind back or begin bringing mankind back. Anyway, I just want to point that out. And just point out to you to keep watch. You'll see these things all throughout this book. And if you're a Christian and you hear something you may disagree with, stay tuned, because you'll probably later hear something you very much agree with, and it will tie everything together. We're just at the very start of this book. Okay? There's a lot to go. And, everyone wants to resist the urge to jump ahead. The mic is free.
It's very, 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 very hard to not jump ahead and then not... And some of the topics that I really would like to focus on require a lot more discussions further on in the book, especially the one that Bruce brought up about mankind and creation having been brought back just so we can now go forward. And so these concepts, these ideas are very vitally important to really important concepts like the Mashiach and why we have a commandment and why we are in existence. And as for serving our Creator, it is the purpose of existence. And how do we do that? And I know I said last week, and I harp on this a lot, is that, God doesn't need us. He desires us. Now, when you desire a relationship with somebody, and I'm going to use a very poor physical analogy, there's certain things that I know that I can do to cause pleasure or pain if you know somebody well enough. And when you choose to bring pleasure to somebody, you do the things that please them. And if you're, in my case, if my husband likes, a certain food, I might make it for him. If I'm unhappy with him, maybe I won't. But the point is that I want to do things if I'm wanting to connect to my mother or my father or to God. We want to do the things that please them, that draw us closer. And if we truly desire that connection, then we're going to avoid those things that cause them that they don't like, that cause them to disconnect from us. And as a result, we know that I'm an individual, that I have things that I like, I have things that I love, I have things I despise, and I'm drawn to people as friends and stuck with them as family. No, I'm kidding. That actually I'm drawn to my friends. I choose my friends based on those type of things. We have similar connections, we have similar likes, we have similar dislikes. And in a broader sense, when we're serving God, there's a proper way to approach our Creator. It's not just, however you see fit. Now, God does love us, and He is patient with us, and we are all inclined towards error. We're all inclined towards mistakes. That's part of our nature. And it's not that we sin and fall. It's that we get back up, and we search out for God, and we look for the right path to serve Him. And so how do we serve God? In this world, it's by falling down, 7 times and getting up that 8th time and going back, because we desire the relationship, we desire the connection. We want to cleave to God. He's our life source, and that's how we serve God in this world. Now, how we do that is there are ways, there are correct ways and that type of thing, and he's building a basis in this book for a lot of things, and that's why he doesn't start with the commandments and prayer and all of these ideas at the very beginning. He brings them at the end because he shows us why we need them. He wants to bring you to a point where you can see why you do these things, why they're necessary, why they exist in our world. Not out of, God said it, so I have to do it. I may not understand. He wants you to know why the commandments exist, why prayer is important, why all these things are in this world, and how they're to function properly. They're not to keep us busy. They're not to set us about, and they're not methods that God can smite us when we get it wrong. These are ways. These are pathways to connect with our Creator. If you went to a physician and he gave you a prescription on how to get better, how to restore your health, you'd do it. And this is the way. This world is sick. It's seriously damaged. It is decaying. It is dying around us, and we don't even know because we have this spiritual disconnection from our Creator and our own soul. So we have a way to fix the world. We have a way to repair ourselves, to bring about a great good. And this is why the Ramchal, he's building up this case. He's not doing it to make you afraid, to say, oh, God's going to smite you if you don't do this. No, this is if you truly love God. And there's so many people who say they don't. It's like, oh, I don't love God. God does, children suffer. There's horrible evil in the world. People hate each other. There's war. There's terror. But you look at the person and they have this innate sense that the world should be good, that people should get along with each other, that there should be blessing, that people shouldn't be in pain, and that's the true purpose of creation. That is the point of our existence, is we are emulating our Creator when we say, why is there war? Why do people suffer? Because you stand at a very pivotal moment in your own life and in the life of the world where you have a section of creation that only you can fix. You were brought here with a purpose. You are here for a reason, and that is to do what God wants you to do. Whether anybody ever sees it, whether anybody ever perceives it, you have a very vital function in creation, and nobody can do what you can do. And that's the point of this whole book, is to get you to see yourself as a soul so you can function as a whole creature. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't want to take time. I just want to kind of mention something she said and get people to key in on it. We each have a purpose. Earlier she read how there are specific challenges we are given. Each and every one of us has a specific challenge we were created to overcome. Each one of us, through overcoming that challenge, actually take part in perfecting of creation. And we each have it. And if you don't know what yours is, that's something to ponder. What is it that gives you the most problem? What is it that seems to be so difficult for you to overcome? It is very likely what is difficult for you to overcome is your challenge that you have been given to overcome. And for me personally, when that, and it's discussed here and there throughout the book, and for me personally, that single issue was a revelation for me that I got from this book. That our challenges were given to us so that we can share in perfecting of creation. That God wants us to share in making things right. I mean, and a beautiful thought, but I just wanted to key in on that so that you can kind of be listening for it and be aware of it as we progress. Thank you. I release the mic.
Bruce, I would like you to, if you don't mind, Bruce or Isabel, to expand a little bit more about this challenge. You said that we are given the challenge to help, is it to help other people, or I'm not really understanding. I didn't understand. If you don't mind, thank you.
I'm sorry, I hope you don't mind if I go ahead. The analogy that I like to think of for my own self is every person is unique. There's a concept called midos, characteristics, good and bad, that everybody has. It's your own spiritual character DNA that makes you you. Just like you have unique DNA that makes you have curly hair or straight hair or blonde hair, all these things that have expressed themselves physically through your DNA. The only analogy I can use is that you have a spiritual DNA as well. And so not everybody can be a super athlete, not everybody can be a physicist, but we all have our own unique gifts. We have our own unique talents. In the physical world, we can see it physically, and the same is true spiritually as well. And so we have our own challenges unique to us. And the important concept is when you focus on yourself, you are also making yourself more usable for the greater world. Not that your perspective should be only about you, only about perfecting yourself to the to the shunning of the world, because we're required as a community. And if you look, God puts Israel as a community responsible for each other, responsible for the good and the bad, and they share that responsibility as a group. And so, but they also have, if you look in the Torah, that Israel is you're responsible for yourself as well. So while you are focusing on yourself, overcoming the characteristics, changing them, trying to strive with your good characteristics to enhance them and to use them in a proper way, and trying to work on those characteristics that are a challenge for you, you perfect yourself, but you also profoundly affect your ability to function in this world as a spiritual being. And as a result, you make yourself more usable in the service of Hashem. So, mic is free.
You mean this is essential for every human being who wants to walk with God, because you know that not everybody will want to truly understand or walk with God. There are some that they will never want to walk with God. So the ones that they want to walk with God, is that rules, or is that essential, or helping another? Is it the rule of God, or is it just I don't know how to say it. Is it mandatory, or is that how God designed it? Is this the one of the rules that that God has made? How do you explain that? Thank you.
Because of our unique placement in creation, we can do great good and great damage. Now, good and evil would be useless if there weren't consequences for either one. As individuals, I think all people are placed at the point where you have let me step back a minute. As creatures with our unique state, I think even in this world, as coarse and as dark and as hidden as God can be, and veiled in nature and veiled behind the evil that we see, that we all have this yearning to look for something beyond ourselves. Like I said, you don't have a chimpanzee sitting and thinking, why am I here? I mean, goodness gracious, well, should I really go out for bananas? Is that all I'm here for? They don't contemplate those things because they don't have that ability to. It's not even a realm that they can even enter into. But you can see, and you look at animals, they love, they're sad, they have very dynamic emotions, they have very dynamic relationships, especially when you get to higher primates and that type of thing. That doesn't distract from us, in that we are created with this spiritual connectivity that we don't share with anything else. So to say, is it a requirement? Yeah, it is, because we will be held accountable for what we do. I think there's a level, and I talked about the bell curve before, that there's a level of understanding in our realm. Most people fall in a bell curve of not everybody's wholly righteous and not everybody's wholly wicked. A lot of people are a good mixture of good, bad, and they function differently. If everybody was always inclined to evil, if everyone sinned all the time, if they had no access to God's light, they had no understanding or fathoming of right and wrong in this world, then our society wouldn't function. There wouldn't be enough police to cover everybody. Yeah, the bell curve. Oh, it's the idea that, I don't know, you're a mathematician, you have to tell everybody that most things in creation, like heights and IQs and these measurable things, fall into clumps that literally are shaped like a bell. And so when you look at people's good versus bad quotient balance, that most people aren't wholly wicked, most people aren't wholly good. They're like a mixture of both, and most people fall in that middle, like a balance between the two. Because most people do try and do good. I mean, like I said, society wouldn't function if that weren't the case. And So we know that God is a loving God. He's kind, so He has given us ways. He has given us pathways. And within our own self, that yearning for something beyond ourselves and how we search that out is as important as anything. And also just revelation of hints, clues in nature itself. And they're very subtle and they're very easy to miss. And that is the double effort that's required just to it takes an enormous effort to break through the physical realm to see a spiritual existence in our world, because it's not provable. You can't touch it, you can't taste it, you can't smell it, but you can perceive that it's there. And that's the problem. It's not God shouting out with a megaphone in our ear, saying, I'm here, serve me, or, it's that quiet hint in creation that makes it difficult or rewarding for the person who chooses to search. And one of the very important principles is we all have biases, we all have our own struggles, but again, I can go back and say God's equipped us with the ability to overcome them if we so choose. And it's not easy. It's not meant to be easy. And it can be really, really difficult. And that's why the reward is so amazing at the end. And in my opinion, is that the reward that we will receive after this period of striving will be so much different than what would have been there for Adam and Eve had they fallen at first. So, the mic is free.
Yeah, I wanted to briefly state, in this room we are not discussing any idea. This is not a missionary room. This is not a preaching room. We are talking about a book. That's all we're doing. The book is The Way of God, or Derech Hashem in Hebrew. That's the topic. Please limit your comments and questions to that topic. We're not trying to preach to anybody. We're not trying to convince anybody of anything. We're simply discussing a specific book. You can take it or leave it. As far as the book itself and what is discussed, we're not enforcing anybody except what is said. We're simply discussing the book. We leave it to each individual to make up his or her mind as to whether or not they will agree with it. So again, I just want to make that point. This is a book discussion in this room. That's all it is. So please do not try to spam or preach or hurl any sort of theological, cliches. Mic is free.
One of the things I'm going to step back from the idea that you have to be perfectly righteous, that you have to be 100% pure and never get anything wrong is the goal, but I don't think I know in my own life that I have not achieved that. And so you're going to see very quickly the case for something outside of your own self to help you along the way. So I don't know how late the room is supposed to be slotted. If you want me to continue reading, I'm more than welcome to go into the next section and into part 9. So I'll read a little bit into 9 and maybe here. So we're getting into the case for death. 9. Besides this, justice decreed that neither man nor the world will ever be able to rise to perfection while in their current fallen state. Because they remain in the spoiled, non-ideal condition, and evil in the meantime has increased, both must go through a stage of destruction before either can arrive at perfection. Man must therefore die, and everything else that was corrupted with him also must perish. The soul cannot purify the body until the body dies and deteriorates and a new structure is composed, that the soul can enter and purify. The entire world must likewise be destroyed and cease to exist in its present form, and it must be renewed in a state worthy of perfection. It was therefore decreed that man should die and then be brought back to life. This is the concept of the resurrection of the dead. The entire world must similarly be destroyed and then renewed. This is the meaning of what our sages taught. 6,000 years will the world exist, and for 1,000 it will be desolate. At the end of this 1,000 years, God will again renew His world. And so you see, when Ramchal said that creation was affected with the fall, he wasn't kidding. It's to the point of not being able to be repaired. It has to be destroyed and rebuilt. And there's an idea within Judaism that may not be familiar to many people, but that part of the process of returning to God and purification and going back to that original state is the punishment of the grave. And it's right there in Genesis. It says, from the ground you are taken, and the ground you will return. That's part of the process. That's part of the return, is that punishment of the grave. And the flood, well, it didn't destroy everything. It took a good portion of it out, but it didn't destroy that process, the world, and recreate the world. There were people left on the ark. But getting back to the punishment of the grave, it's a really important concept, and it's a painful process because your existence doesn't end with your death. You're still keenly aware, and this is a Jewish understanding. You don't have to agree with it. And I will actually give you, if you would like, I'll find it. There's a very nice article written by the translator, Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, regarding death and the Jewish concept of what the punishment of the grave is. I don't know if anybody has a book. It's called The Real You, and he writes about this concept, and he expands upon the idea of this punishment of the grave. But the part that is difficult is you're keenly aware. The soul and the spiritual connection, as you'll see, your soul and body, he used the word soul, but your spiritual physical connection is always there, and it won't cease to exist. And resurrection of the dead means you're resurrected in a physical body with your spiritual self. And so we know that we still exist after death, and the idea is that as the body undergoes this decay process, it's part of returning back to the earth and becoming part of the physical, and the spiritual is returning to God. And it can be an instantaneous process, but it's actually, according to Jewish understanding, kind of a slow process, depending on how much you were involved in this physical realm. That's a different topic, and like I said, it's not something I want you to say, I agree with that exactly. It's just a different idea, so take it or leave it however you want. So he's getting into the idea of the punishment of the grave, and it's set right up there in Genesis. So it's important that you're going to return to the earth, Adam, because of what you did. All these things are going to happen. And so he says, but we know we don't cease to exist. What happens to our spirit? And you see here, the true time and reward, reading in 10, the true time and place of reward will therefore be after the resurrection in this renewed world. Man will then enjoy his reward with both body and soul. The body will be purified by the soul and will therefore be in the proper state to enjoy that good. People will not all be equal in this time of reward. They will attain different levels, depending on their work to attain perfection in this world of effort and striving. This will determine how much the soul can radiate and thus purify and enlighten the body, so that both of them can gain excellence and elevation. This in turn will delimit how worthy they are of bringing themselves close to God, basking in His light and enjoying His true good. And the idea of the soul is a real burning ember that as soon as it associates with the body is basically like dumping it in snow. So once the soul is allowed to show the radiance of its works, to shine with the energy that it has created through good deeds, through serving God, through cleaving to the Creator, then it can truly obtain its purest function in this time of renewal called the resurrection, and can thus fulfill its purpose for creation in the first place, which is to purify the body and to make this connection a whole one, a perfect symbiosis of give and take between the two. I don't know if anybody has any questions at this point. I I can continue. Let's see here. It's hard. Like, so much I want to say right now. It's really hard to keep back because there's some more concepts coming up. I'll read just a little bit more. Since it is decreed that man must die, body and soul must remain separated until the time comes for them to be reunited. During this period of separation, an appropriate place must exist for each of the two separate parts. The body thus returns to its element, decomposing and losing its form. Since the body originated from the dust, it must return to it, and this is what God told Adam in Genesis 3:19, "You are dust, and to dust you must return." A worthy soul, however, has only to look forward to the time when what must be done with the resurrected body will have been done. The body must undergo decay and composition, remain appropriate time, and finally be reconstructed anew so the soul can re-enter it. During this intermediate time, however, the soul also needs a place. It is for this reason that God prepared a soul world. When a soul leaves its body, it enters this soul world and remains there in a state of rest while the body undergoes what it must. During this period, the soul experiences sublime delight, very much like that which will be bestowed upon the individual later in the period of genuine reward. Its level in the soul world is also determined by its accomplishments, just as the ultimate reward. The true perfection destined for those worthy of it, however, is not attained by either the body or the soul alone, but by the complete man consisting of both of them combined after the resurrection. And the idea is to the amount of striving is the amount of reward. And it's not that the people who do the greatest, most flashy, amazing things in this world get the biggest reward. We don't know. For some people, the challenge is unique and the reward is unique. And one of the things that the Ramchal says time and time again is every variable in a person's life is there for a reason, and we can't say just that one simple choice that a person makes, how profound and how important and how much that affects themselves and creation as well. So he makes a point later on to say, and you'll see him say it again and again in the book, that everything is a perfect balance that only God knows because He's the Creator. He's arranged everything for the greatest good of all people, and so it's not necessarily the ones who get the most attention that are doing the greatest things. Sometimes some of the most righteous individuals are the ones you would never guess and you would never suspect. And so everything that is in creation, in our own lives, every event is there for our greatest good if we choose it to be that way. Or we can always choose to disconnect, hang up the phone, and do whatever we want, and that's that. So, do you have any questions at this point?
I just want to point one thing out, and Isabel, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but earlier we were discussing how mankind can help perfect creation and actually, or at least affect creation in both positive and negative ways. Elsewhere, it's discussed in various sources how as one grows in righteousness, in effect, it's a ripple effect that reaches up to heavens, and you actually, it's like using Drano on a hose, on a pipe, on your plumbing. As you become more righteous, the plumbing becomes unclogged, and so more of that more of that spirituality from on high is able to flow into the world, and you're going to affect it positively or negatively. You're going to. Always. We all do. There's no way around it. And so as we grow in righteousness, we in effect unclog the pipes. And we allow more of that light of God to flow down into the world through us. And we can affect the world in far greater ways than we can imagine. We don't really know. We can't see the effect we have. But we each have, every one of us has, a very powerful effect on the world. We just are not aware of it. So I just wanted to point that out in the context of mankind and the spirit and sharing in creation and that kind of thing. I also want to real quickly point out again, this room is very specific to a discussion of a book written by Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, Derech Hashem, or the Way of God. That's the purpose of this room, is to simply discuss that book. This is not a theological discussion. It's a discussion of a book to enlighten people of various modes of thought from the Ramchal, Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, and you can choose to whether or not you accept it or reject it. It's up to you. We're not preaching anything. This is simply a discussion of a literary work. In my opinion, one of the greatest literary works that have ever been penned. Mike is free.
I'm just going to continue on in 12 because it's he really wraps up a lot of the things that he's been saying here in 12. And so he talks about the soul world. He says, besides being a place for the soul to await the resurrection, the soul world also provides another benefit for the soul and ultimately for the resurrected body as well. Because of Adam's sin, it was decreed that man could attain perfection only after death, even though his deeds may be such to have made him worthy of perfection while he was still alive. For without life in this world, man could never attain perfection at all, since the only time allotted for earning perfection is in this world before death. It's a really important thing. Once you're dead, you don't affect the physical realm. You don't have the ability to make choices anymore. Going on. As a result of this decree, the body must remain immersed in evil in this world and can never completely disassociate itself from it. The soul, which is associated with the body, is therefore also darkened and dimmed. So you have a pairing here of a physical body and a spiritual being, the soul, and they have absolutely completely different agendas, and they at times are working against each other. And this association with evil we talked about before, you have to eat, you have to work, you have to live, and you have needs. They're physical needs, and they pull you in the opposite direction of your soul. And so at times, even the necessity of this world, as much as you'd like to disassociate and go and meditate for 23 hours a day, you can't. You have physical functions your body has to do. You have physical needs. You have responsibilities. And so there can be a great conflict between the two. And continuing, through the good deeds that one has done, the soul might have earned itself perfection and excellence, but this cannot be expressed. The soul cannot shine with radiance appropriate to the excellence that it actually attains, but it all remains concealed in the soul's essence until the time comes for it to be revealed. The soul, however, bears no blame whatsoever for this. It is only the nature of the body that prevents its full expression. The body, however, also suffers a great loss because of this, since during man's physical lifetime it cannot be appropriately purified by the soul. So you have this really important connection. The body needs the soul to be constantly renewing it, constantly connecting, and the soul needs to have an effect in this world for the radiance to shine forth, to insert its energy and the energy of the deeds that are the good deeds into this world to cause the world to how do I explain it? Most like you said, we're pipelines. We're not the ones doing it. We become vessels. We become through our actions, and we become basically drains, windows into the world for God's light to shine. And when we muddy the windows, when we cover them up and pull down the shades, then God's light can't get into the greatest extent possible. And it's the soul at one time, is crying, is screaming for the body to stop acting like an idiot and to get it right, and we can't hear and as a result, the soul tries very much, understanding to affect the world, but it's very limited because of our actions. So I'll read a little bit more. Nevertheless, the soul also loses. During man's physical lifetime, it is imprisoned and cannot spread its radiance. It furthermore cannot perform its proper task, which is the purification of the body. If the soul were able to do this, it would also perfect itself through this very act. In purifying the body, the soul would resemble its creator in doing good and bestowing perfection on another, and this itself would further enhance the soul. So you have this beautiful, radiant, created being that has a profound amount of the light of Hashem flowing within it, God willing, and it's now just been chained to a dead body. It's really this horrible opposite. It wasn't always so, and the body was not meant to be this obscuring, limiting, malfunctioning creation that it's become. But it is, and that's why the soul takes a profound hit when it makes that association. And so it loses its function, it loses its ability to function properly in this world, and it can't do its full function and full purpose. It can't. I'll go on a little bit more. The soul was furthermore created for the very purpose of purifying the body. Did I just read that? I'm sorry. When the soul leaves the body and enters the soul world, however, it can then radiate freely with a brightness that befits it as a result of its good deeds while associated with the body. Through both this and what it can attain in the soul world, the soul is able to regain the power that it lost while associated with the body. This, in turn, makes it more qualified for its ultimate function after the resurrection, namely the purification of the body. So all the good deeds, all of this energy is stored up, but it can't express itself until the resurrection. And that's when you get to see the beauty and the radiance of the soul in its glory at the proper time, functioning the way it is supposed to be. And when the two are united in this state of restoration, then the soul for the first time can function properly and fulfill its purpose. And when you get into the idea of the soul, and you also get the idea of prayer and all these other higher functions, I really want to skip ahead. It's so hard not to. That this concept of the soul purifying the body and the soul connecting to God, and the two are bound together. It's really important. These concepts come up again when the Ramchal brings up ideas of prayer and prophecy and meditation. All these things are really important concepts to understand, to see why we need to pray, why prophecy exists in this world. These spiritual highs and these really dark lows, why do they exist in our lives? Why can't we always be at this state of always connected to God? And why sometimes we have these periods of absolute enlightenment where we can perceive things that we don't normally see, and all of a sudden we go back to wondering if God exists and why am I here? And so these are all really important functions of the reality of our world and the unique challenges that everybody faces. I think we go till 11. Is that true? I just don't want to go too long for everybody. So I'll go on a little bit more. In 13, even before a soul enters the body and attains perfection through its deeds, it already has a high degree of intrinsic perfection. The intrinsic perfection and brilliance is so great that it should be able to purify man's physical being to such an extent that he would no longer be considered a mortal human being. The soul, however, is held back by God's decree. Its power is obstructed and its brilliance reduced so that it cannot do everything in its power to accomplish this. The soul thus remains imprisoned and restrained to the degree required by God's plan, and it can only act upon the body to the extent God's wisdom allows. But the soul is not, you got to understand, the soul is not bound to the existence of time in our world. The spiritual realm, the existence of the soul, the true environment of the soul is very different than the physical realm, and so the creation of the soul doesn't necessarily happen at the same time of the body. That we pre-exist our body because the spiritual realm is outside of time. I don't know how that's the only way I can state it. That you didn't come into existence when you were born on your day. When on your birthday, that you were a spiritual being that existed before. I'm skipping ahead, so yeah, it's placed in the body. It's already there. I know if you go to different writings that you can find that we have a spiritual self, that the limitations of this world don't apply to the spiritual realm. Do we always exist? Again, like the concept of time. we have a beginning. No, we didn't always exist, because we are finite beings. We are created beings. So there's a point where we have an existence, where we came into existence. God is the only influence, the only thing that has no creation and no beginning whatsoever. We can finish up the section if you like. Here we go. As the soul continues to participate in good deeds, it should likewise be able to spread out and radiate, thus purifying the body. The same decree, however, holds it back and prevents it from functioning freely until it reaches the soul world. When the soul is recombined with the body after the resurrection, however, it will no longer be bound or restricted and will enter the body with all its brilliance and strength. The body will then experience a great enlightenment and will not have to develop gradually as a child does now. The soul will immediately shine forth and purify it to a very great degree. This does not mean, however, that the resurrected man will not be able to continue to elevate himself. The instant that the soul re-enters the body, the individual is raised to a high spiritual level and the body experiences its initial enlightenment. At this point, the body will immediately be on a higher level than it could ever possibly obtain in its first life. The degree of enlightenment will depend on the individual's good deeds in his first life, and accordingly he will be placed on an appropriate level among those worthy of enjoying this ultimate perfection. This level, however, is not permanent, and the complete man, both body and soul, will still be able to elevate himself in relation to the initial level upon which he is placed. And this goes right back to the very beginning of the section, saying that the whole point, the double reward, is we have to work just to get to the point of that initial state of creation, and then we have that ability to strive and to seek reward and to do good like Adam and Eve had, and we can continue to perfect ourselves by choosing good and continuing to emulate our Creator and to draw closer to our Creator. And when we have this a very enlightened physical body that's been brought to a state we can't comprehend in this world by the soul, we'll be able to seek to do that in a way that is not obtainable in this world whatsoever. And there's a lot I want to say, but it's really difficult because I'd be skipping ahead to the 200s and the 100s, and we're only on page 59. So I don't want you to. If you have any questions or any comments or where you think the study's going, I'd appreciate them. But thank you very much for your time. Any comments? Oh yeah, I have. What caused me to buy the book, I'm going to say my own personal thing, is I really wanted to understand the whole, the concept of Mashiach. Where did this idea come from? Yeah, it's in Judaism, but where did they get it, and what does that mean? And so I heard one quote out of the book, and it's the book. This one quote caused me to buy the whole, just to find this book. I heard. And it wasn't even the purpose, the point of this whole book wasn't. Let me see if I can find that. I'll give you. Let me see here. I gotta find where it is. You think I'd know where it is after saying all that? If you like reading ahead, find it. Okay, here it is. We're talking about suffering and the time of reward and the time of earning and striving. It talks about an individual, and you can read it yourselves on page 123 if you have the book. Caused me to do this. So the whole idea that he's laying out this framework here that he's really going to get into in section 2 about Providence. And he's saying, so the idea of a time period of striving and a time period of sublime reward is important. And he's laying out a case where he says, you really, really have to be close to God. And our actions in this world are really important because it ultimately determines how close we are to God in the world to come. It really affects our position in this world to come. And so as he builds his case further and further, he'll get into the human responsibility and the spiritual realm. you start to say, oh my gosh, I start to say, I'm in trouble because I'm going to be scraping gum off the streets if I continue in the way I'm doing. And so you see very clearly that you have to have something I need for myself, something beyond myself, because as left to my own devices, I have a real good knack at messing things up. So I heard the quote that this idea of suffering and people suffering on behalf of another is a really important concept. And I'll give you one little quote. The suffering of this is a really righteous individual called a Tzaddik, but Ramchal, now this is the teaser quote that made me buy the whole book. It says, the suffering of a Tzaddik, of a righteous person who is perfected, right? He says, the suffering comes to provide the help necessary to bring about the chain of events leading to the ultimate perfection of mankind as a whole. And when the Ramchal says perfection, he doesn't mean that, we all have... perfection is the amount that we emulate our Creator, the amount of connectivity that we have to God and our Creator, and the amount of perception that we have of God in this world and in ourselves. So perfection is this ability to cleave to God in an even greater way. So we have this idea of, we know we're not going to get it right. I don't. On that bell curve, I fall at the wrong end, unfortunately. And so he talks about in the idea of the suffering and a reward, that there are methods that God's given us outside of ourselves to help us, to give us that extra boost, that we might not have the wherewithal to use that spiritual Drano and be able to unclog our own pipes, but there are methods that ways that God has created for us to have a benefit from someone else. So as I'm reading this section, it's so hard not to jump ahead to these other ideas, because if you, when you read the book, you can see how he's building up this case, and you're like, yes, I want to say this term Messiah, I want to say all these things, and I can't. So anyway, so we've finished up with fundamentals, and we're going to be getting into section chapter 4, human responsibility. So. Anyway, thank you very much for your time, and if you have any questions or comments, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to encourage people again. I know, and I Luminous, I can agree. When you listen to someone go through a book, it can sound confusing. And I read this book, and it seemed so simple as I was reading it, but it's difficult. There's a difference between reading and listening, because when you read something, when someone's talking, you can't make them automatically rewind and restate what they just said. They keep going. But when you have the book, you can read it and reread it if you need to. If there's a certain sentence that you want to grasp the real meaning before you go further, you can reread that sentence. So it helps enormously. Enormously. Believe me, if anybody here who thinks this may sound confusing, when you get the book, believe me, it's not confusing. And it actually helps a lot as you listen to her too, because you're kind of aware, and if you've read it already, you've already got things on your mind that you can ask or consider. But you really, this is an outstanding book. And there's been a couple of people come in the room, and it's very sad, who apparently are traditional Christians and who think that what is being discussed here is anti-Christian or is against the New Testament or whatever. And it isn't. If they would stay, they would realize that. What this book does, if you purchase it and if you participate in the studies and the discussions, is it clarifies. It just dramatically clarifies things. Little details that were puzzling to you maybe, or you really couldn't quite get it. This book helps you get it. It supports what is written in the Scripture. Completely supports it. And it's sort of it's almost, in a sense, it's a foundation for the foundation in a sense. This is the kind of stuff that, like, the Apostle Paul, Shaul, himself knew and thought that a lot of other people already knew. And in fact, a lot of other people around him did know that. So he didn't go into depth on this stuff. It was just commonly understood. particularly by Paul. Because Paul, there have been a couple of people who have come in here and said something harsh about Kabbalah. Anybody who's against Kabbalah, you better tear up your New Testament because it is full of Kabbalistic ideas. I mean, literally, you better burn your New Testament if you don't like Kabbalah because it is thoroughly dripping with it. But you can only see that when you've read a bit of the, and I'm talking about true kosher Kabbalah. I'm not talking about this New Age trash that a lot of people are going after these days. The real kosher stuff. The New Testament is heavily based upon Kabbalistic understandings. Heavily. But of course, if someone has never studied it, and this is a very basics of Kabbalah book, okay? I mean, very, very, very basic, okay? Some of the fundamental issues are addressed in this book. And this is largely what you'll see the New Testament is also based upon, these fundamentals. But you really have got to get this book. If you want to participate in discussion, you'll learn from the discussion and you'll benefit from it for sure without the book. But your benefit will be magnified and multiplied by orders of magnitude if you would simply get the book, The Way of God by Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. You can get it from the publisher, Feldheim. Actually, the Yashanet info that Bahano just posted, that link will direct you to how you can obtain the book. The mic is free.
For some reason, I just can't get to talk. I was going to say that the Kabbalah, the most difficult concept in the Ramchal's book, Derech Hashem, for me to deal with, and I'll say this now, the only place that I found for supportive texts was actually in the book of John. And it was, honestly, for me, when I first read through the book, there were a lot of concepts that I had never been exposed to before. And so I'm looking outside of the Ramchal's work to say, okay, fine, let me take a step back and see, okay, where does this exist outside of this book? And I was surprised that some of the most blatant, obvious supporting material came from the New Testament, and like I said, I don't want to bring people to the New Testament. That's not the point of this book or this room. But coming to this next concept, some of the concepts, and they do come up pretty quickly. You'll find a lot of supporting evidence, and I think it was shocking to a few people that when I discovered that, and I said, "Hey, look here, do you see this?" And they had read it for years, but when you look at the concept that the Ramchal will bring up, and then you look and you say, "Oh my gosh, that is like this amazing concept that you would never expect to find in the book of John or in the book of Matthew." So, and as for Kabbalah literally means in Hebrew to receive, and in Jewish thought there are different approaches to Scripture, different ways of approaching and understanding scriptural verses and connecting them. And there's a method in Judaism called Pardes, and it has different levels, like a literal, and then there's hints, and then there's drawing all these different ideas and concepts together. And then you have this very last, very mystical, deep interpretation of Scripture called, and that really deep level of understanding is where you get to this concept of Kabbalah, which is a grouping of teachings that are focused primarily on that very deep understanding. And there are parts of the Scripture that there is no literal interpretation for, and you have to automatically jump to a very deep and level of understanding, a very mystical understanding, and like Ezekiel and his vision of the chariot and those type of things. So it's a systematic approach to understanding Scripture so people won't get too far off base. If you want to do some background reading, I'm going to look up a couple of links. I can send them to you on some of the topics I discussed. And the homework is start reading Human Responsibility and come up with, and this is a pretty short chapter, but it's, again, pretty deep.
Yeah, I was just going to come in, Isabel. You were mentioning about truly, to become truly perfected, and the difficulty, almost impossibility of that goal. And for me, that's what the Path of the Just expands upon. And it's interesting because in that book, it admits, and it's the same author, he admits that it is an almost unattainable thing. And it's interesting, when I was reading about the author in that particular book, it was talking about how that book has actually been rejected by a number of people because it seems to portray an impossible goal. And it's, which to me, anyway, for me personally, the fact that it's such an impossible goal, such a difficult goal to become truly pure, truly innocent, brings me to a higher level of appreciation for, in my view, Yeshua, who accomplished it. The fact that he accomplished what is almost, it's not impossible, but it takes an extreme level of love for God and devotion. An extreme level. It is possible for a human to do it, but it is extremely difficult to attain. And but anyway, that's one reason why I read that book after this one, because it kind of goes off in a different direction and focuses on something different. But really, people, you really ought to get this book. I'm serious. Don't be one of these Kabbalah haters like I used to be, because like I said earlier, if you hate Kabbalah, you're going to have to burn your New Testament. You're just going to have to, because you don't realize it, but when you read the New Testament, you're reading a lot of Kabbalah. So, I mean, it is the fact. You're reading a lot of Kabbalah when you read the New Testament, and most people don't even realize it. Mike is free.
Okay, Isabel's voice just got deeper. How's that sound? I grabbed the mic from her because our daughter just got home from play practice. She's in The King and I this weekend at the Jewish Federation building in Manchester, New Hampshire, if anyone wants to know. Okay, but anyhow, I was away actually most of the evening tonight, and my daughter has makeup on. I don't even recognize her. So a couple things, folks. We do have that website, and please take a look at it for a couple of reasons. One, and bookmark it, yashana.com/Derech. Let me get this right. There we go. Because we're going to put updates on there. We're going to put new types of material, we hope to, Lord willing. We just put up the audio files from Lesson 1, so if you missed Lesson 1, you can go up there now and hear all of it. It's about 2 hours long. It's good stuff in there. Tells you how to order the book if you want to order the book. We also have a link over to Facebook discussion board. So all you got to do is connect to Facebook, which is free. If you don't have it already, just connect. And the discussion boards are neat because I'm throwing some additional material up there from a different perspective, just including tying a lot of the stuff into the New Testament more, which is not Isabel's focus. Her focus is just to teach Torah here. But I'm trying to tie in certain aspects more to parts of the New Testament. And that discussion board also allows you to make comments and ask questions and bring up topics. It's a great place to extend this study throughout the week, challenge each other, and we can use some of the things that come up in the discussion boards to feed into the room and back and forth. So please, definitely, and we're gonna. And by the way, if you look ahead in the book, the soul is a topic that comes up. You can. There is a link. You can actually play the first study, like I said, by just going here. Everything is connected to that web page. So we'll talk more about the soul later. Also, if you guys want to have a continuation room from a different perspective on the weekend, I'm available to do that. If you want to talk about New Testament more, if you want to talk about Kabbalistic stuff more, the soul, we can go on the bunny trails that won't take away from this room, and that way we can keep this room on track with the lessons. So we have lots of opportunities to go outside this room and keep the discussions going and bring up some new ideas, etc. That's the whole point of this, to really grow this. So Isabel's doing a great job. She's an outstanding teacher, and please ask her questions. That's probably her best skill, is answering questions. I can't stump her. I've been trying for 12 years to stump her, and I look like a fool when I try. So she's very good at answering questions. So please, if you read ahead and you have some that's great, try to stick to the lesson every week. Like I said, we can use the discussion boards and other chat rooms to go down the different bunny trails. So I don't see a listen now on this site. Is Yehoshua B.A. in the room? Yehoshua, can you answer any questions regarding the website? Or maybe there was something being changed. But it's there. Okay, he says it's there, so I guess you have to look again. There's a link to the page with the audio files, and on that secondary page is the link to the file from last week. So again, it's important to... there is in all of, and by the way, I think there's a link there, but if you want, just send you can just send, here you go, isn't it Olive or anybody else, you got questions, just throw them to that email address, isabel@yashanet.com. If you send anything to yashanet.com, we'll get it, she or I will get it, it's our website. So anyhow, please, thank you so much. This is the second night we do this. It looks like we're pulling it off. 40-plus people in the room I see again, which is awesome. Again, this is just the beginning. We're only through the first 3 sections out of about, 28 sections in the book or something like that. So we're only 10% of the way through this book. And again, we can, as it goes, it'll get deeper and deeper every week. So I don't even know how far you got. I'm assuming you got through all of 1.3 because I wasn't here. But Lord willing, we'll have this audio in a couple days. We just have to edit it down to size because the audio files are huge and need to be trimmed down. Yehoshua's working on that. And so please, any other questions or comments, grab the mic or whatever, but we're going to call it a night officially here. And I better get off the mic because people are going to think Isabel has a very deep voice. Yeah, Baruch Hashem, I know, this is just going to get better every week. So, good stuff, folks. We'll give it a couple of minutes for any questions in the room, otherwise we'll shut it down for the night. Again, I'll have this room open on the weekend, either Friday or Saturday night. We'll see. There's a lot going on for us this weekend because we have a play. My daughter's play is this weekend, so I don't know, but I think we can still do it. So, Lord willing. Asher, what are you referring to? Zohar, how much does what go into Zohar? This class is not hardly at all. This class is not a Kabbalistic class. This is a class on basic fundamentals that underlie the Torah. So this class is more of a midrashic class, more of a study homiletical thing. It's not a word study. You want to go do word studies? Go ahead. No, this is a class teaching the way things are taught in the yeshiva. Only probably in the yeshiva they're beyond some of this stuff already, but it's good for all of us. Asher, did you have a question about that? I don't know if you wanted to clarify that. Moshe Chaim Luzzatto presented from a Kabbalistic perspective. Well, you have to understand that all of these sages and teachers of Israel are knowledgeable in all aspects of the Torah. So they may be teaching, you can have someone teaching a little kid about Noah's Ark, and that person may know all of this stuff, but that's not what's downloaded to a child, So, Luzzatto is obviously a master of all of these things, but this particular study that we are doing is not focused on that. It's always there because it's all of Torah is one. Torah may have different ways, different levels of studying and understanding, but it's all one. So, So that's not the focus of this book or this class, but there will be some things that come up that are, you can't avoid it when you talk about the Bible and religion and stuff. It's mystical. Even a simple topic like prayer. You pray, you think God is a God that hears you and there's a response to that prayer. That's pretty mystical. That's pretty Kabbalistic if you think about it. Angels and what's all that about, the soul. Any one of those topics relies a lot on these traditions that are handed down, because the Bible gives us very sketchy information on these things. You know, if you start asking detailed questions, the Bible doesn't get into the extreme details of this stuff. That has been passed down generation to generation through the Jewish people since Moses' time, and that's partly what we're doing here tonight too, is trying to pass along information that has been passed along and how the Bible's been understood, and trying to be faithful to that. Any other comments or questions on the book, the study, ideas, any? Like I said, if you go to the link, everything's there. You can email from there. I hope. I think there's an email link on there somewhere. There better be. Yeah, there is. And so, again, the discussion boards are on Facebook. You can get to the discussion boards by way of that link. And the discussion boards are other types of information related to the material. We've got up to part 2 on there. I'll put some part 3 notes up during the week, over the weekend, Lord willing. And it's a great place to comment back, ask questions, clarifications. That's the place to do it. All right, everybody, have a good night. Look on the weekend for a possible room open. Lord willing, we'll try to open one either Friday or Saturday night, or both for a little while, just for any other comments or questions. Get the book. If you haven't got the book is worth $1 million more than you'll ever pay for it. There's the link. It even tells you how to get the book there. We don't sell the book. It's not from us. You can get it on Amazon anywhere. I like getting it from a good Jewish bookstore. Help them out. Amazon doesn't need your money. Lila Tov, Shalom, and thank you all so much. Next Wednesday, Lord willing, is the next room. Wednesday night, tell your friends. Wednesday nights, tell your friends. 9 p.m. Eastern, tell your friends. Did I mention? Tell your friends. And get the book and bring some friends and relatives, and let's see if we can have more fun with this. All right, thank you. Going to close the room then. God bless. Make sure you all sing Shema before you go to bed tonight. Give your kids a hug.